Here we have some odds and ends with chapter 13 because these really don't fit into any other part. So we're going to sort of put them together and cover them now. Okay, the first one is impeachment process. So there's only been a few presidents that have been impeached. And a lot of people don't seem to have a grasp of how that process works. So we're going to go over it here. Okay. So first off, you need to understand that the House of Representatives, if they think the president has done something against the Constitution or against the law, then they can draft articles of impeachment. So this is basically the House of Representatives laying out, okay, here's the evidence that we think shows that the president did something wrong, okay? Now the Constitution says that the president to be impeached has to be guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors. The problem is that in our current system of law, what we call high crimes is a felony. What we call lower crimes are misdemeanors. So unfortunately, it sort of muddies the waters because high crimes would mean like felonies and misdemeanors would be like parking tickets and like speeding and things like that. And so you're going, well, okay, those aren't the same thing. So normally what people understand it to be is felonies, okay? So if they're looking at those high crimes and misdemeanors, the House drafts articles of impeachment. So they say, we have combed through stuff that the president has done, we've gathered the evidence, and we are now going to vote to impeach the president. When the House votes to impeach the president, it is a lot like a grand jury. So if you remember from back on our study of the Constitution, a grand jury is simply a jury designed to look at the evidence and see if more than likely there was a crime committed. So all it takes in the House is a vote of 51%. Just more than likely, do you think a crime was committed? All right? So if that moves forward, then that's what that means. And unfortunately, a lot of people think when the president is impeached that somehow they're guilty of a crime and they're supposed to go to jail immediately and stuff like that. That's absolutely not the case. All right? So what impeachment means is that the House of Representatives thinks a crime might have been committed. And that's what a grand jury trial does. It doesn't convict anyone. It just says, this is a quick look at the evidence and we're going to see, let's move this forward, And it just takes a 51% vote. Now, what you have to understand is that at all times, one of the two major parties, the Republicans or the Democrats, control the House. And so at 51%, an impeachment can be simply politically motivated. And usually the best way to see this is if pretty much just one party votes for impeachment and the other party votes completely against. And so if it is split on party lines, odds are this is a politically motivated move, and that's why the whole fervor about it is so intense, because it's really just a political power game. So that's something to keep in mind. There have been presidents that have been impeached based on party lines and others that are not. And so that's the difference that you probably want to take a look at. What's the vote and how is it split? Okay? It next goes to the Senate. So the House impeaches the president and it starts the process and they turn the evidence over to the Senate. The Senate then runs a trial. Okay? So this is like a regular trial jury. So first we have like a grand jury, it goes to trial, then we have the actual trial, that's done by the Senate. The justices, in this case, the judges will be the Supreme Court. Okay? So they're the judges in this. And the senators then call witnesses, they interview people, please take the stand. It's like a trial and the Supreme Court is lined up there and the witnesses come forward and the justices then decide whether it's a legal proceeding. This can be as fast or as slow and done however the Senate wants. So whatever happened in the House is now turned over to the Senate for the trial. This is a higher bar, and so you need a 66% or greater vote to convict a president of any high crimes or misdemeanors. If that is done, then what happens is the president is removed from the office of the presidency. So there's still nothing that says they could be going to jail or doing anything like that. This whole process is just to remove them from the presidency. Okay, so if they are convicted in the Senate, then they are removed as a president and they become a regular citizen. Then they can be subject to any sort of court trials that might possibly take place based upon the crimes they might have committed way back here. So you've got to have a grand jury, you've got to have a trial jury, and then you've got to go to regular court before any president is actually going to go to jail. Okay? So the Founding Fathers understood that the presidency is elevated to a higher level. They've understood that they need to put protections in place because politically motivated people will, of course, attack the president with any means necessary. And we've had several impeachments based on political motivations, okay? And you could possibly say that all of them were. But, that's something that the Founding Fathers understood that could happen. And they didn't want the legislature to have so much power that they could just bash the president with impeachment proceedings in order to just control the president and make them be sort of a second-class part of the government, okay? But they also wanted a way to remove presidents if they were overstepping their bounds. And then they went back to the other side and said, yeah, but the people elected him, and we don't want to have the people's will thwarted, because that's the whole point to this new government we're creating, is we the people. So back and forth their arguments went over impeachment proceedings. So if we look at impeachment proceedings, the first one we need to look at is Andrew Johnson. And so he was the vice president under Abraham Lincoln, who then became president when Lincoln was shot. And he wasn't very popular with Congress. He was sort of a Southern sympathizer is what they saw. Lincoln had plans to be very generous with the South after the Civil War, and Johnson tried to follow through with those, but the Northerners said, no, this war has cost us dearly, and someone's going to pay, and it's going to be the South. And so they tried to impeach Andrew Johnson. I think in the Senate they came up one vote short. They had 65, and it was very close. So he was impeached, he was not convicted, and he finished out the term. All right? We don't have another impeachment proceeding until we get to Richard Nixon. But for Nixon, he wasn't even impeached. The House was simply doing investigations before drafting articles of impeachment. But, I'm sure he made the calls, and everyone in the House of Representatives said, hey, look, the way we're seeing this, you're done for. And he called the senators, and they said, yeah, we can see the same thing. So he decided to resign before this process ever went forward. Okay? So he probably would have gone all the way through this had he stuck it out. So he just resigned and said, I might as well get this over with. The third president that we had impeached was Bill Clinton. He was impeached for lying under oath about his affairs that he was having. And so that is a felony. So he was impeached in the House, and he had a fair number of Democrats. He was a Democrat, his party, vote against him. So it was mostly a politically motivated one. You can see it was pretty much all Republicans and some Democrats voted for impeachment. When it went to the Senate, though, the senators just sort of, okay, forget it. No, we're not going to remove the president because of this. All right? So that was interesting. The senators basically said, yeah, he did, but it doesn't rise to the level of being a high crime. Okay? So that's the way that went with Bill Clinton. So he was impeached, but he wasn't convicted. Okay? Our next president to be impeached was Donald Trump. So this is an interesting one because this came down almost entirely on party lines. I mean, this was just the House Democrats were in control there, and they voted to a person. Every Democrat voted he should be impeached. And then every Republican voted, I think except one or two, I'm trying to remember, voted that he should not. Okay? So it went to the Senate, and the Senate, controlled by Republicans, just said, whatever. I think they went through it in like a day was their trial, and they just said, nah, nothing to see here. Okay, so there was an investigation for 2 years. Was Donald Trump colluding with the Russians? The Mueller report, it was the special investigator, Robert Mueller, came out and just sort of said, well, there might have been something there, and he tried to interfere with a thing, but he wasn't guilty in the first place, so he interfered for nothing. So, and the senators just said, yeah, we don't care. Okay, that's really not there. The whole thing was just a political show. So that's what the Senate said. The House Democrats were, of course, oh, he's so guilty of, whatever we voted for. And so you have to make some thoughts there. Was this a consensus? No, this was pretty much a party line vote. And so that usually leads you to believe it was a politically motivated thing. But that's for you to figure out there. I'm just trying to give you some tips and some strategies as to how you look at some of these things, because going forward in America, I can envision pretty much every president getting impeached when the opposite party controls the House. I mean, that's how vicious things have started to become. And so if the president is of one party and the House is of another party, I think they're just automatically going to be impeached. And that's something our founding fathers were afraid that would happen, and so they tried to steer Americans away from that. And for a long time, our traditions held that parties should not use this as a politically motivated tool, but it's looking like that's becoming more and more the thing. So unfortunately, that's the case, and I would expect that, yeah, that's my prediction. Anytime there is a House of Representatives controlled by one party and a president controlled by the other, you're going to see an impeachment. Okay? Until our culture changes, I think that's the way it's going to be. All right. Going over here to whistleblowers. So how do we keep corruption out? A lot of laws have been passed to protect people that are on the inside of federal bureaus, bureaucracies, and independent agencies, that if they bring to light some lie the government is telling, some false thing or corrupt activities that are happening, there are laws in place that are supposed to protect those people, whether it's witness protection program or they can't be fired from their job, those kind of things are in place. However, there has been wide variation in the application of that, okay? So it has been very apparent, especially in the last 20, 30 years, that some people are protected because of politically motivated individuals. There are some power players in the government that will actually encourage whistleblowers, like, hey, would you say that it's bad because, no, cover your back. We've got that kind of thing going on, and other times we've had individuals that end up on the FBI's most wanted list. Eric Snowden is the classic example where the National Security Association said it was not spying on Americans. He came forward and said, no, they are spying on Americans, and here's the proof. And then he ends up on the FBI wanted list. He flees to Russia, and he's been living there ever since. So, yeah. So it seems like whistleblower protections still have a ways to go because they're not actually applied fairly, equitably, I guess, where everyone's equal when those kind of things happen. What instead happens is if we like what you say, we'll protect you, and if we don't like what you say, we won't protect you. So America's got a ways to go. And unfortunately, you're going to see this kind of thing used for politically motivated purposes as well, just like the impeachment proceedings. So that's why I included these two together. They're both covered in your book, but I think that's the common denominator from these two, is that you need to understand how they work, because unfortunately they're becoming a political tool more than a way to fight corruption. Okay? So we'll see how America develops going forward, and it'll be an interesting study. I'll see you in class.